On quiet nights like this, when the world softens at the edges and the sky hangs low with a hush of silver clouds, there is a street in an old American town that the moon has never touched. And as you settle in, letting your breath slow and your body loosen into stillness, I invite you to drift with me, Evelyn Blackwood, from midnight murmurs, radioing to that forgotten lane where shadows remember more than people do. Before we wander deeper, let your shoulders grow heavy, your jaw unclench, and your thoughts fall like dry leaves from a gentle autumn breeze. Inhale slowly, letting the soft air warm your chest, and exhale quietly, releasing the noise of the day. Let the world outside your room fade into a distant hum. Tonight, the only road you need to walk is the one I'm about to show you, a safe and quiet place shaped only by imagination and calm. A bedtime story, a sleep story, a relaxing story, a guided sleep meditation wrapped in the coziest, most peaceful whispers of the night. Now picture a small town warmed by the charm of old brick sidewalks, wooden porches, and lampposts that glow with the soft amber of another era. The kind of place where time stretches and sighs, where stories echo in weathered window frames and in the creak of century-old staircases. And tucked behind the town square, beyond the bakery that still uses a coal oven and the post office with a hand-painted sign, lies a narrow street known as Hawthorne Lane. A street the moonlight has always refused to touch. Locals say it's S because of the giant oaks draped over it, their branches thick with hanging moss, weaving into a canopy that swallows any stray beam of light. Others whispered that the moon, for reasons only she knows, simply chooses to look away. Whatever the truth, Hawthorne Lane remains forever dim, forever quiet, as though holding its breath. As you walk with me into this stillness, I want you to feel how gentle the night becomes here. The air cools, not in a frightening way, but in a way that makes your skin feel more alive, like brushing your fingers across chilled velvet. The soft tap of your steps blends with the rustle of leaves overhead. All around you, wooden homes from the late 1800s stand in serene silence, white paint faded to cream, porches sagging but dignified, chimneys still carrying the faint memory of hearth fire and winter evenings long gone. This is where our story begins. Years ago, how many? No one quite remembers. A woman named Lillian Hart lived at the very end of this lane. She was a school teacher in a time when chalk dust lingered in the air like morning fog, and children walked to class carrying tin lunch pails and folded paper notes. Lillian moved to Hawthorne Lane during a quiet autumn, arriving with a single suitcase, a stack of poems, and eyes that seemed to search for something no one else could see. Some said she had lost someone. Others believed she was running from a choice she wished she had made differently. But if you ask the oldest residents, those who remember the color of her shawl or the sound of her gentle laugh, tell you something else entirely. They'll tell you that Hawthorne Lane didn't change her. She changed Hawthorne Lane, and the moon noticed. Start feel your breath slow again. Let the story wrap around you like a warm blanket pulled to your chin. Let the night deepen, not with fear, but with quiet curiosity. Because as you approach the place where Lillian once lived, you notice something subtle. A soft hum, or perhaps a whisper, a shift in the air, not threatening, just there, present. The kind of sensation that reminds you that the past never really disappears. It just settles into the quiet corners of a place, waiting for someone peaceful enough, someone like you to listen. You reach Lillian's old house, a 2-story Victorian with pale shutters and a porch swing that still moves on windless nights. The lantern by the door flickers with a warm, inviting glow, though no one has lived here for decades. The boards beneath your feet are cool and smooth, as though polished by time rather than hands. And then, just as you step closer, you feel an almost imperceptible shift in the darkness. The moon, which hangs softly above the town, dims just slightly, its light bending away, as though refusing once again to brush even the edge of Hawthorne Lane. Why the moon avoids this place? That is a story woven with choices echoed, and the quiet tragedy of wanting something too deeply. But for now, let yourself drift with this calm mystery. There is no rush, no danger, only a gentle unfolding of a tale older than its tellers. And as the story fades into a soft pause, allow yourself to drift into a peaceful sleep. The lantern by Lillian Hart's porch glows with a soft, honey-colored warmth, as though it remembers the gentle hands that once lit it each evening. You stand before it, breathing slowly, deeply, letting the quiet of Hawthorne Lane seep through your chest like warm tea spreading through cold hands. The darkness around you feels neither heavy nor threatening. It simply exists, listening, patient, holding memories, the way ancient trees hold wind. And as you linger there, allow yourself to sink deeper into this peaceful stillness. Feel your breath lengthen, your shoulders loosen, and your mind drift further away from the noise of your day. This is your safe corner of the night asleep story, a bedtime story, a gentle relaxing story woven with threads of quiet mystery and soft American ghosts. The porch swing creaks, a long slow exhale of wood against rusted chain. It shifts no more than an inch, but enough to catch your eye. There is no wind. Not even the moss hanging from the oak stirs, yet the swing moves as though someone has just risen from it or is about to sit down. You're not afraid. Oddly, you feel welcomed. Inside the house, everything is still. Through the window you see a faint, golden glow, not electric, but the warm flicker of a lamp fueled by oil, the kind used in the late 19th century. It sways gently, casting elongated shadows across the wallpaper patterned with climbing roses. It's as if the home is trying to recall its shape, its colors, its heartbeat. You step closer, letting the wooden porch accept your weight with a soft sigh. The boards feel cool under your feet, worn smooth by time and countless quiet evenings. The faint scent of cedar lingers in the air, mixing with the earthy sweetness of fallen leaves. Then you hear Ita's soft tapping, like knuckles brushing lightly against a window pane. Not Uri, not urgent, simply a reminder that someone or something remembers you're here. You follow the sound to the side of the house, where an old classroom slate leans against the wall. The chalk marks on it, though faded still, showed the looping handwriting of a teacher who once began her lessons with gentle patience. Begin again. It reads, "To Simple words, but words that seem to thrum with meaning. You imagine Lillian Hart standing here more than a century ago, brushing chalk dust off her fingers, her eyes soft and thoughtful. People said she was kind, but sadness clung to her like a second shadow. Some believed she was haunted. Others whispered she had made a choice that fractured her life into a choice she could never fully walk away from. The moon, they said, refused to shine on the place where regret settled. You lift your gaze toward the sky, and the truth becomes clear. The moon hangs full and bright above the town square, illuminating rooftops, chimneys, the spire of the old Methodist church, the flagpole by the courthouse. But the instant her light reaches the oak canopy of Hawthorne Lane, it hesitates, glows faintly, and then bends away, as though a soft, invisible hand guides it aside. A street without moonlight, a house without time, a woman without rest. As you take another deep breath, you feel a gentle shift in the air, a soft, cool brush against your cheek. Nods, a brise, something quieter, almost like a presence passing by, leaving calm instead of fear. The porch swing moves again, this time a little more than before, as though someone has settled onto it with slow, careful grace. The chains give a soft groan, steady and rhythmic. You turn your head slightly, not out of alarm, but curiosity, and you sense the faint outline of a woman sitting there, dim, gentle, blurred at the edges, like a memory haft. Her dress seems made of dusk itself, her silhouette blending with the shadows that the moon refuses to touch. And then you hear a voice, not with your ears, but somewhere between the quiet of the night and the quiet inside your mind. Thank you for coming back. Her words ripple through the air like soft water. You feel no fear, only warmth. Only a sense that this place has been waiting not for anyone, but for someone who would listen with a peaceful heart. The lantern flickers, the shadows stretch, and the old house seems to inhale deeply, as though relieved to finally have company. Somewhere, far behind you, a church bell tolls the hour. Slow, hollow, a sound that seems to echo down the years, rather than across the town. And as it fades, allow yourself to drift deeper into this calm mystery, letting your breath guide you into a softer state of stillness. There is more to Lillian's story, more to Hawthorne Lane, more to why the moon looks away. But that will come in time. For now, let the calm settle into your bones, and as the night thickens around the house, allow yourself to drift into a peaceful sleep. The swing drifts in its slow, thoughtful rhythm, as if moved by some unseen tide deep within the house itself. You stand quietly, letting the moment settle, breathing softly so as not to disturb the fragile calm resting over Hawthorne Lane. The faint outline of the woman, blurred like a watercolor in the dark, remains on the swinger shape, swaying gently, her presence woven from silence rather than substance, and though the night carries a subtle chill, the kind that slips between the gaps in old wood and whispers against your skin, your mind feels warm, peaceful. The rhythm of the swing becomes a kind of lullaby, slow and steady, like a heartbeat wrapped in shadow. Lillian Hart's presence, if this truly is, heard us not speak again. She simply exists beside you, her form faint and quiet, as if she is remembering how to be seen. The moon, high above the oaks, shies away from touching her shape, bending its light in a soft arc that leaves the porch wrapped in comfortable dimness. This quiet, untouched darkness feels sacred, preserved, as though the air itself knows to hold its breath. You take a deeper inhale, letting the story guide you into a calm, restful pace. Your thoughts unwind like threads loosening from the day. This is still your bedtime story, your sleep story, a gentle, relaxing, peaceful, magical, calming, and each detail brings you deeper into its safe, quiet world. A soft creak echoes from the door behind you. Not abrupt, not startling, just old wood adjusting, as if remembering footsteps it used to welcome. You turn toward it, feeling a subtle invitation tug at the edges of the air. The lantern glows brighter for a heartbeat, illuminating a narrow line along the doorway, and then settles again. With slow, steady steps, you approach the door. The handle is cool beneath your fingers, metal polished not by hands, but by time itself. When you push it open, the house exhales a soft, warm sigh that brushes past you like the fading scent of lavender. Inside, the living room feels untouched by years. A braided rug in muted blues and browns lies beneath a small wooden table. A rocking chair rests by a brick fireplace, its curved legs worn smooth from decades of soft motion. Above the mantel hangs a framed photograph, a simple portrait of a woman with kind eyes and a distant smile. You know, without needing to read the name, that this is Lillian Hart. Dust motes drift lazily in the lamplight, glowing faint and golden, as though suspended in warm honey. The air smells of cedar, old books, and the sweet, lingering memory of evening tea. You breathe slowly, letting this gentle stillness draw you deeper into the house, deeper into the past. In the corner of the room sits a teacher's desk, small, tidy, with papers stacked neatly as though waiting for morning. A single piece of chalk rests beside a slate, its white tip glowing softly in the low light. Words are written there in careful script. Do not fear what remembers you. The message is calm, not a warning, a reassuranza. You stand quietly, letting the meaning settle. Behind you, the rocking chair moves just an inch, a tiny sway, enough to suggest someone once spent many quiet nights here, grading papers by lamplight, listening to the soft hum of crickets on Hawthorne Lane. You imagine Lillian sitting there, her dress gathered at her ankles, her thoughts drifting to places she never spoke about. Some say she came to this lane to escape something, others say she came to find something. Either way, the silence she left behind still holds her shape. You take a few steps toward the hallway. Your footsteps sink into a long, faded runner rug patterned with curling vines, muted greens, and deep reds softened by age. The walls are lined with framed poems, handwritten and gently yellowed. The words blur slightly in the low light, but the emotion in them lingers. Melancholy, hope, longing. Halfway down the hall, you pause, sensing a soft hum of frequency, too gentle to be sound, too present to be imagination. It seems to come from behind a closed door at the end of the hallway. The doorknob gleams faintly. The air around it feels warmer, like breath against your fingertips. And then, gently, something shifts. The silhouette from the porch Lillian appears in the doorway behind you, not as a sudden apparition, but like a reflection in rippling water, slowly becoming clearer. Her outline glows faintly, a soft dust-colored shimmer. She raises her hand, delicate and steady, and gestures toward the closed door at the end of the hall. Not urging, not warning, inviting, you breathe in, feeling the calm deepen around you, the quiet embrace of the house growing warmer, softer. Whatever waits behind that door is part of her story, part of this lane, part of the reason the moon refuses to touch this place. The rocking chair stills, the lantern flickers once, and the darkness, gentle and patient, waits with you. Let the calm guide you, let the night hold you softly. And as this part of the story comes to rest, allow yourself to drift into a peaceful sleep. The house settles into a deeper hush as you stand in the dim hallway, Lillian's faint outline shimmering softly behind you. The air around her feels cool, almost like the gentle breath of autumn evenings long gone, carrying a softness that soothes rather than startles. Her presence is calm, quiet, patient more, like a memory that has learned to stay still than a ghost seeking to be seen. You let your breath slow, the inhale long and easy, the exhale warm and grounding. This is still your peaceful corner of the night, a sleep story, a bedtime story, a relaxing story meant to guide you gently inward. The calm of Hawthorne Lane wraps around you like a blanket worn from years of tender use. Even the shadows feel soft here, like folded velvet. The closed door at the end of the hallway seems to pulse with some faint, lingering warmth, as though holding the last heartbeat of a forgotten time. The hum you sensed earlier remains steady, not a sound exactly, but a presence like the air itself is quietly remembering something it once heard. Lillian's silhouette inclines her head, encouraging but unhurried. Nothing in this place demands anything of you. It only invites. You begin to walk toward the door, each step sinking gently into the old runner rug. The floral patterns beneath your feet blur in the dim light, their colors softened by the years, like watercolor left out in the rain. The wooden floor creaks, but only in a way that feels familiar, like a friendly reminder of the home's age. As you get closer, a faint fragrance drifts into the air, lavender and old parchment, with a hint of something sweet, perhaps the memory of chalk dust or pressed flowers. It settles into your breath, soothing, grounding, calming. When your hand reaches the doorknob, the metal is warm, not heated, but touched recently, as though someone stood here moments before you. The hum grows just a little stronger, vibrating gently beneath your fingertips. You open the door slowly. Inside is a small room, intimate and quiet, bathed in the faintest glow of amber light from an unseen source. The walls are lined with shelves, each stacked with notebooks bound in twine and cloth. Their spines are worn, their pages slightly curved. The air is rich with history stories breathed onto paper 100 years ago and never spoken aloud. At the center of the room sits a wooden desk, neat and carefully arranged. A single book lies open upon it, its pages slightly yellowed, but the ink still clear. Written in the same looping script you've seen elsewhere in the house. A bookmark made from dried wisteria petals peeks from between the pages, fragile and paper-thin. You step closer, the calm deepening around you. Your heartbeat slows to match the stillness. Across the open page, written in soft black ink, is a date October 17th, 1892, and beneath it, a line that seems to glow with quiet sorrow. The moon turned its face tonight. I fear it knows what I tried to hide. You read the words again, slower this time. They carry no bitterness, only regret, tender and aching. Behind you, Lillian's presence draws nearer, her outline sharpening just a little. You don't turn, you don't need to. Her calm fills the room like a sigh, allowed to rest after too many years. You flip to the next page, the paper whispering as it turns. More handwriting follows. I wanted to do right, but choices do not disappear, simply because we wish them to. Some echo, some cling, some bind themselves to the places where we hope no one will look. A soft tap sounds behind you, the gentle closing of the door you left ajar. The room grows even quieter, as if pulling itself closer around the story resting in your hands. You can almost imagine Lillian sitting here more than a century ago, bent over her desk, the lantern casting long shadows across her pages. Perhaps she looked up at the window now and then, noticing how the moonlight stopped just short of the sill. Perhaps she wondered if it was judgment or mercy. Your eyes shift to a loose page tucked beneath the book. You slide it free. The script is hurried, uneven. If the moon will not bear witness, then I must, before the lane forgets me entirely. There is a space beneath the words meant for more, meant for the truth she feared to write. But the rest of the page is blank. Behind you, the air softens. You feel Lillian's presence, like a hand gently placed on the back of your shoulder. Not weight, not touch, just awareness, quiet and warm. She is waiting, not for forgiveness, not for pity, but for someone to see the part of her story she never finished. The lantern flickers faintly, the room breathes. And as you sink into this calm, timeless space, allow the story to guide you a little deeper, and allow yourself to drift into a peaceful sleep. The loose page trembles faintly in your hand, almost as if breathing with the room itself. The ink, though over a century-old, still holds a quiet urgency, a confession waiting for a voice soft enough to hear it. Around you, the small attic-like study rests in its own pocket of stillness, warmed by the amber glow that seems to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. The shelves, lined with Lillian's journals, lean in with gentle anticipation, as if they too remember the night the moon first refused her. You place the loose page back on the desk with care, as though setting down something fragile, a dried flower petal, a childhood keepsake, a story that has waited too long. Your breath moves slowly, evenly, the way it naturally does when your body begins slipping into deeper rest. This moment, this room, this gentle presence, it all serves your bedtime story, your sleep story, your relaxing story, coaxing your mind further into calm as the mystery unfolds with soft, quiet hands. Behind you, Lillian's outline shifts, her dust-colored silhouette hovering like a thought forming at the edge of memory. She does not step closer. She simply remains steady, patient, woven from silence. Her presence is no longer a blur. It has gained a subtle clarity, as if your attention gives her shape, as if your calm gives her permission to be seen. You turn another page in the open journal, fingertips brushing along ink that trembles with old sorrow. The next entry is short, its words carefully pressed into the page. I heard him again tonight, the footsteps on the lane. Slow, measured, as though he walks without weight, as though he waits for me to answer. A chill not frightening, just cool and feather-like drifts across your forearm. You breathe in, letting the sensation pass through you like the wind passing through a field of tall grass. Lillian's presence feels closer now, not looming, but gently reaching, as though grateful to finally have someone walking these memories with her. You flip ahead, and then you stop. There, sketched in graphite on a single page, is a drawing soft. Dark strokes forming the outline of Hawthorne Lane, as it must have appeared in 1892. Tall oaks, moss, the curve of the road, the very house where you stand now. But your breath catches at something else, something faint, almost erased. A figure standing at the far end of the lane, tall, unmoving, its features smudged by time, or perhaps deliberately softened. Beneath the sketch, Lillian's handwriting, he stands where the moon cannot reach. As you study the drawing, the air in the room begins to shift, barely perceptible, like this subtle deepening of night just before dawn. The hum returns, steady and low, vibrating gently at the base of your spine. Not threatening, simply present. A reminder that Hawthorne Lane is not empty, in the way ordinary streets are empty. And then you notice something new. Another sketch lies tucked beneath the first, smaller and hastily drawn. You ease it free, your fingertips brushing its uneven edge. This one is darker, the graphite pressed harder, the lines more urgent. A face, not detailed, but suggested by shadow, eyes shaded beneath an indistinct brim of what might be a hat. And below it, he knows. You exhale slowly, letting the tension melt away, letting the story cradle you gently rather than rattle you. For even as the drawings darken, the atmosphere stays soft, wrapped in the warm textures of old wood and fading lamplight. Lillian's presence shifts again, the faintest tilt of her head, like gratitude or apology, or maybe both. You return the sketches to the journal and close it gently, letting dust motes swirl in the soft amber glow. Then something catches your eye. On the far shelf, one journal stands slightly apart from the rest. Its spine is newer, less worn, tied with a strip of faded blue ribbon. You are toward it. the floor creaking in its familiar, comforting rhythm. As you draw closer, the ribbon stirs without breeze, without touch, lifting just a little, as though exhaling. When you slide the journal free, a folded letter slips out and drifts to the floor like a feather. You kneel and pick it up. The envelope is sealed with wax, cracked with age, but still holding its shape. The impression left in the seal is a small crescent moon turned upside down, its light deliberately facing away. You peel the wax gently. The paper inside is thin, translucent with age. The first line reads, "To the one who finds this, I am sorry for what the lane remembers." Your breath softens, slow and deep. Lillian's presence dims behind you, as if waiting for you to continue, as if afraid of watching you read more, as if what comes next is the heart of her story, the truth she could never place into the journals she left behind. You turn the page over, read it or read, but there is no more writing. Not yet, only faint indentations, words pressed, but not seemed, like a confession, started and abandoned, a truth she could not bring herself to finish. The lantern flickers, the room breathes in, and the night on Hawthorne Lane deepens, waiting for you to turn the page that Lillian never could. Allow the calm to gather around you now, soft and steady. And as you rest in this moment between knowing and not knowing, allow yourself to drift into a peaceful sleep. The letter rests in your hands, light as a whisper, fragile as the memory of a breath. The faint indentations across the page, those unfinished, unwritten sentences, seem to glow softly in the amber hush of the study, as though they hold their own quiet pulse. The house around you grows still, the air warming with a gentle anticipation, like a story waiting for the courage to speak. You hold the paper up to the light, that translucent fibers catching the glow. In a soft golden sheen, your breath deepens, falling into a slow and steady rhythm. This is still your peaceful haven, your bedtime story, your sleep story, your relaxing story, unfolding with the soft weight of old secrets that prefer to be uncovered gently, patiently, without haste. The calm settles into your spine, your chest, your eyelids. Behind you, Lillian's outline dims, then sharpens again, as though flickering with the emotion she can no longer voice. Her form has grown a little clearer now, shaped more fully by your presence, by your listening. She stands near the door, hands clasped lightly before her, her head bowed in the quiet poise of someone who has waited too long to share what she cannot say. You lower the letter, gaze lingering on the faint markings. The indentation shows the beginning of a sentence, its shape barely visible. It began on the night the moon turned away. Your pulse softens. You read it again, absorbing the weight beneath the words. The page ripples slightly, though no wind touches it. More indentations follow, but they are shallow. Has it abandoned halfway through their forming? Like confessions whispered into a locked room. A soft creak breaks the silence. The lantern on the desk dims and brightens, as though gathering its strength. Shadows stretch across the walls, long and smooth and unthreatening, like old curtains stirring after years of stillness. The journals on the shelves give a subtle shiver, their pages rustling just once, like breath catching in the throat of the house. You turn slowly, following an unseen tug. The room behind you seems to expand in its quiet, the hallway beyond stretching like the long corridor of a dream. Lillian remains by the door, her dust-colored form trembling just slightly. Not with fear, no. Her presence is too gentle, too calm for fear. It is something closer to longing or release. Dachute. A small, steady step. The warder. The floorboards respond with a soft sigh. Her silhouette lifts her head, and though her features remain blurred, the shape of her shoulders loosens, as if relieved that you haven't turned away from her story. When you step into the hallway, the air grows cooler, but the coolness is comforting, like the quiet breath of night air slipping in through an open window. The hum you felt earlier returns, not louder, but deeper, resonating through the wooden walls and floorboards as though the entire lane is remembering something at once. Lillian moves with you, guiding without touching. The shadows part gently as she passes, bending around her like soft waves. The house responds to her presence, boards settling, distant echoes waking, the faint scent of lavender drifting in her wake. You follow her toward the living room. As you enter, the rocking chair begins to sway again, slow and patient, its motion like a lullaby etched into wood. The fire in the hearth unlit until now glows faintly, as if remembering embers from a night long gone. On the table beside the chair rests another object you didn't notice earlier, a small wooden ruler, the kind teachers once used. Its surface polished smooth. A name is carved into ITL heart. You brush your fingers over the engraving, and a soft echo slips through the room. Children's laughter, gentle and distant, warm as sunshine filtered through leaves. The echo fades quickly, leaving the house wrapped once more in its soft, patient quiet dot. Lillian stands near the porch door, now her form steadying, the edges of her presence becoming more defined. She turns slightly, as though looking at the street beyond, at the old oaks, at the place where the moonlight still refuses to fall. You step closer, the house exhaling behind you, the night inhaling ahead. The porch is dim but calm, the swing still, the lantern glowing with a steady, honey-colored warmth. Hawthorne Lane stretches toward the dark curve of the road. Its shadows velvet dash soft dot. For the first time, you feel it dot not fear, not dread, but expectation, as if Chapter 1 has only laid the groundwork of the truth, and what waits beyond the gate of Hawthorne Lane. The footsteps, the figure, the moon's refusal is part of a deeper story that Lillian has only begun to reveal. Her outline lifts an arm's graceful and gestures toward the lane. N. Invitation. The night breathes around you, thick with silence and memory. Let your breath soften, let the calm deepen. And as this chapter closes, allow your body to relax into the stillness of the lane, letting the story linger like a lullaby. As the story fades, allow yourself to drift into a peaceful sleep. And if you've been enjoying these soft, midnight tales, please consider subscribing to Midnight Murmurs. Radio, your support helps keep the lantern burning for the next quiet story. Morning arrived gently, as it often did in this quiet, forgotten corner of the countryside. Pale sunlight slipped through the thin curtains of Evelyn's bedroom, laying soft, muted stripes across her blanket. She woke with the strange sensation that someone had been standing at her bedside, only moments before, not a presence she could name, but the fading warmth of awareness lingering in the air. For a long moment, she didn't move. Listened. The house, so alert the night before, was now calm in a way that almost felt apologetic. The gentle hum in the walls had settled into something steady and slow, like a deep breath after a long, restless night. Eveline sat up, brushing a few loose strands of hair behind her ear. Her gaze drifted to the hallway beyond her cracked-open bedroom door. Morning light softened the corners of everything it touched. Nothing looked threatening. Nothing whispered. Nothing watched. She stepped onto the floor, half expecting the cold touch of that midnight draft, but the boards were warm underfoot us, though the house had stored the night's secrets somewhere out of reach. She moved to the kitchen, the familiar scent of old wood and faint lavender rising from the cupboards. She set a kettle on the stove, letting the clang of metal break the last remnants of the night's silence. As the flames beneath the kettle flickered to life, Evelyn leaned her palms against the counter, closing her eyes. The blank sheet of parchment from the study returned vividly in her mind, the delicate grooves spelling her name, written in a hand that wasn't hers, then erased as though the house had changed its mind. "Why me?" she whispered into the empty room. The house did not answer, not yet. The whistle of the kettle startled her more than it should have. Evelyn poured hot water into her mug, steam drifting upward like a thin, ghostly ribbon. She wrapped her hands around the cup, grounding herself in the warmth before carrying it into the study. The morning sun cast a diagonal beam across the desk and the parchment. She froze. The paper was no longer blank. Her pulse fluttered painfully, as delicate and frantic as a trapped moth. She set her mug down slowly, every muscle tightening with caution. Words covered the page now, faint but visible, written in a soft gray as though the ink hadn't fully decided to exist. One sentence. Short, almost gentle. "I remember you." Evelyn's throat tightened. She stepped closer. The handwriting was thin, flowing, old-fashioned, light, the kind found in century-old letters pressed between pages of forgotten books. Her fingertips hovered just above the surface of the paper, not touching, not daring. She swallowed. "That's not possible," she murmured. The house had no reason to remember her. She had only been here a few months. And yet, something deep inside her chest trembled, like the faintest tug of déjà vu. Her heartbeat shifted, slowing, as though the words on the page were pulling at something older than her memories. She backed away, the wooden floor creaking softly beneath her steps. The house did not react. It did not shift, did not groan, did not send a draft slipping beneath the doors. It merely waited, the way an old friend waits for someone to speak first after too many years apart. Evelyn's breath wavered. She dropped into the old armchair by the window, hugging her knees to her chest. Outside, the trees swayed lightly in the wind, their leaves whispering secrets she couldn't hear. Everything beyond the walls felt so normal, comfortingly normal. But the normalcy only made the words on the parchment more impossible. "I don't know who you think I am," she whispered to the room. "But you're wrong." The lamp beside her flickered once, not in protest more, like a quiet, sympathetic sigh. Evelyn squeezed her eyes shut. Warm sunlight brushed across her face. For a moment, peace. Just a moment. When she opened her eyes again, the study felt different, calmer. And though she couldn't explain why, she sensed the house wasn't demanding anything from her. Not today, not in daylight. It had spoken once, and now it waited with patient certainty. She rose from the armchair, hands still unsteady. She folded the parchment carefully, slipping it into the drawer of the desk, as though putting it out of sight could slow the momentum of whatever was beginning. But deep down, she knew it wouldn't. The house had a memory, and it believed she was part of it. She touched the edge of the desk, grounding herself. "If you remember me," she whispered softly, "then show me why." The floor beneath her responded with the faintest, warmest hum, like the house was gathering its courage. Morning light deepened. The day stretched quietly forward, and somewhere in its wooden bones, the house prepared to answer her. The day passed with a strange, lingering softness, as though the house itself were trying to ease Evelyn into whatever truth it carried. She moved through her chores slowly, thoughtfully, always aware of the folded parchment resting in the drawer of the study. Occasionally she would pause in the middle of sweeping or washing dishes, half expecting a whisper to drift through the quiet halls. But the house remained still, watchful but gentle, like something holding its breath. By late afternoon, clouds gathered low over the tree, their edges blurring into a dim gray that muted the light inside the house. Evelyn stood by the kitchen window, watching the breeze ripple across the tall grass. The calmness outside soothed her, though underneath it all lay a faint tremora reminder of the message waiting in the study. As the sky grew darker, the house seemed to change, not soothingly, not dramatically, just slightly, the way an old friend's expression shifts when a difficult memory stirs. The air thickened with an almost nostalgic warmth, as though someone had lit a distant lantern deep within the walls. Evelyn sensed it immediately. Something was asking her to return to the study. She hesitated, breath catching softly in her chest. "All right," she murmured to the empty kitchen. "I'm coming." She stepped into the hallway. Every board beneath her feet seemed to steady her rather than unsettle her, guiding her the way a familiar path guides someone walking home in the dusk. When she reached the study, the room felt different than it had that morning, warmer, dimmer, wrapped in a quiet that was not silence but memory. The lamp on the desk glowed with a golden hue, though she didn't remember turning it on. The drawer where she'd hidden the parchment was already slightly open, as though nudged by a gentle hand. Evelyn approached the desk, her pulse a soft flutter beneath her skin. She slid the drawer open fully. The parchment was there but no longer folded. It lay flat, as though waiting for her eyes alone. More words covered it now, the same soft grey script curling across the page like breath on glass. "You walked here once before." Evelyn's breath stilled. "Once before." She tried to laugh it off, but the sound caught and dissolved before it ever reached her lips. She had never been to this town before moving here. She had never seen this house in her life. And yet, a thin thread of familiarity curled around her thoughts, tugging at something hidden beneath the surface of her memory. She leaned closer. The letters shimmered slightly, not with light but with age. like ink remembering how to exist on the page. For a long moment, she didn't move. Then soft, barely noticeable, the room shifted. A faint vibration tremored through the floorboards, subtle as a heartbeat. Evelyn straightened slowly. "What do you want from me?" she whispered. A draft drifted across her ankles. Not cold, warm, comforting. A presence easing itself closer, shaping its intentions carefully. The house, she realized, was not trying to frighten her. It was trying to be understood. She stepped back from the desk, rubbing her fingertips together as though the air itself carried the memory of another time. Behind her, the window reflected the dimming sky-gray clouds, gathering into a stormy hush. Thunder rumbled far away, soft and low, like someone clearing their throat before speaking. The house answered with another subtle shift, guiding her attention toward the far corner of the room where an old wooden cabinet stood. Evelyn blinked. She had looked inside that cabinet before. It was empty, completely empty. But now, something pressed faintly against its wooden door from the inside. A soft bump. A gentle reminder. Her heartbeat quickened, not in fear, but in anticipation. She approached the cabinet slowly, each step sinking into the quiet like a footstep into thick snow. The knob felt warm under her hand, as though touched recently by someone else. She hesitated only a second before pulling the door open. Inside sat a single object, thin, rectangular, wrapped in aged fabric, the color of dried leaves. Evelyn carefully lifted it out, brushing dust from its surface. A book, a journal, older than the house, perhaps its leather soft and worn with time. Her name was pressed faintly into the cover. Not Evelyn, but E. Blackwood. Her breath trembled. Her family name. The air around her seemed to tighten with emotion, not fear, but a deep, aching recognition. As though the house had been waiting decades to show this to someone who would understand. She opened the journal. The first page was blank. The second, too. But the third, faint handwriting swirled across it, barely visible under the trembling glow of the lamp. You promised you would return. Evelyn closed the book slowly, holding it to her chest, as though steadying two heartbeats. Her own, and the one she could feel humming faintly through the journal's spine. Outside, thunder rumbled again, closer now. Evening darkened the corners of the room, gathering shadows like old memories returning home. The house did not frighten Evelyn anymore. It waited with patience, offering pieces of a story she hadn't realized she was part of. She tightened her grip on the journal. "Then show me the rest," she whispered. The house exhaled a warm, gentle shift through the floorboards, ready, at last, to tell her everything. Evening settled over the house with a quiet that felt almost ceremonial, as if the walls themselves understood the importance of the moment unfolding inside them. Shadows softened along the floorboards, stretching gently across the study as a low hum filled the air, steady, warm, and strangely reassuring. Evelyn held the old journal pressed close to her chest, feeling the faint pulse within its spine, a rhythm that did not belong to any living heartbeat but something older, something patient. Thunder murmured again in the distance, not sharp or threatening, but muted, like a memory rising through layers of time. The lamplight flickered softly, and she sensed the house waiting for her next step, guiding her without force, nudging her forward with the gentlest touch. She took a long breath, tasting the warmth of the room, the faint scent of dust and lavender lingering in the old wood. "All right," she whispered, as though speaking directly to the house. "Show me what I've forgotten." She opened the journal again, turning past the blank pages with slow, deliberate care. Her fingers trembled slightly. She wasn't afraid, not anymore, but deeply aware that each turn of the page might peel back a piece of herself she had never known was missing. On the fourth page, new handwriting appeared, not old ink, not faded lines, fresh words forming at the edge of her vision, blooming like breath on cold glass. "Follow the hallway when the storm begins." Evelyn blinked. The words remained crisp and pale. She closed the journal gently, holding it in both hands, grounding herself in its weight. Outside, the storm had not yet arrived, but the clouds hung heavy, waiting for the first drop of rain. As she stepped out of the study, the hall stretched before her, dim and warm, lit only by the soft amber glow of a single wall sconce. The house felt more alive than it ever had in daylight. The floorboards beneath her feet carried a subtle vibration, a heartbeat of their own, guiding her forward in a rhythm almost musical. Evelyn started down the hallway, each step slower than the last, as if the air thickened around her with every foot she placed. "When the storm begins," she murmured to herself, glancing through the small hallway window. The sky beyond was darkening, clouds swirling with a strange, muted energy. A quiet stillness hung over the world. Then one soft tap of rain, another, a gentle patter. The storm had arrived, and with it the house shifted, not violently, not soothingly, but with a slow exhale, as if releasing a truth it had held too long. The light in the hallway dimmed, softening into a warm golden haze. Evelyn walked forward, the journal tucked safely against her ribs. The further she moved, the more the hall seemed to expand, not physically, but emotionally, as though memories long sealed behind the walls were stretching to meet her. At the far end of the hall stood a door she had never noticed before. Old, wooden, darker than the others, its grain swirling like smoke frozen in time. A brass knob gleamed faintly in the lamplight. Evelyn's pulse quickened as she approached. Her breath caught not from fear but recognition, deep, wordless recognition. She reached out. Her fingers brushed the cold brass. A tremor rippled through the air. The house hummed a soft, almost affectionate sound. When she turned the knob, the door swung inward with a sigh. Inside was a small, narrow room. Bare walls, wooden floor, nothing else except on the far wall, carved delicately into the wood, was a symbol, a crescent moon crossed by a single line. Evelyn's heart stilled. She stepped inside, the air shifting gently around her like a warm breeze. The symbol glowed faintly in the low light, as though remembering her touch even before she lifted her hand to it. When her fingertips met the carving, the room responded instantly. A soft hum rose through the floor, through the walls, through her chest, vibrating the journal she held. The carving warmed under her touch. Something old awakened. Behind her, the door closed on its own with a quiet, decisive click. Not trapping her, protecting the moment. The symbol's faint glow pulsed once, twice, then dissolved into light, revealing a thin seam in the wall she hadn't noticed before. A hidden panel. Evelyn pressed gently, and the wood swung open like a long-held breath escaping. Inside the panel lay a single object, a small silver key, polished, untouched by dust, waiting. Evelyn lifted it carefully, feeling warmth spread across her palm the instant she touched it. The journal vibrated softly, as though recognizing the key, and then one final line appeared on the inside cover of the journal, materializing as she watched. The door remembers you. Now you must remember it. Evelyn swallowed hard. She closed the journal, her fingers curling around the key. Thunder rolled outside. Rain fell steadily, whispering against the roof. The house seemed to settle, content, ready for her to continue. She turned toward the hallway, the key glowing faintly in her grasp. Whatever door it belonged, to whatever memory it guarded, waited somewhere within the house. And tonight, at last, the past was ready to be found. The silver key rested warm in Evelyn's palm as she stepped back into the hallway. The sound of rain growing steadier overhead. The house darkened around her, not ominously, but gently, as though dimming the lights to help her see what had always been hidden beneath the surface. The journal hummed faintly at her side, tucked beneath her arm, its warmth matching the rhythm of the house, as if both the object and the walls around her shared a single heartbeat. Evelyn moved slowly, her steps cushioned by the soft glow of lantern-like sconces that flickered awake as she passed them, guiding her deeper into the quiet. The storm outside pressed against the windows, but it felt distant now, like a memory rather than weather-soft. Thunder rolling like an echo from another time. She paused halfway down the hall. The air thickened with a subtle shift in temperature, as though the house was gently nudging her towards something she had overlooked. She lifted the key, watching the way its surface caught what little light remained. "Where do you belong?" she whispered. The house answered not with sound, but with a slow, warm breath through the walls. A hint of movement drifted toward the stairs. Evelyn followed. The stairway spiraled downward into a part of the house she rarely visited, not because it frightened her, but because it simply felt forgotten. A place holding its breath. Tonight, though, the steps creaked softly beneath her, the wood warming subtly with each footfall, as if welcoming her back. Thunder murmured overhead. Rain whispered steadily across the roof. She reached the bottom of the stairs. A faint draft drifted through the corredora. Familiar one, the same, warm, nostalgic current from the night the house had first spoken. It curled around her ankles now, coaxing her forward. She passed the old storage room, the dusty shelves, the cabinet whose doors no longer hid their secrets. The house guided her to a place she had never noticed before, a narrow hallway branching off from the main corridor. C'est frone. It shouldn't exist. When she'd first moved in, she had measured and mapped the entire lower floor, but now here it was stretching softly into darkness. The key warmed in her hand. The journal pulsed with recognition. Evelyn stepped into the new hallway. The air grew still, heavy with the weight of years that had been sealed away. Along the walls hung faded portraits' faces, she couldn't quite recognize, blurred by time, though something in her chest tightened at the sight of them. She slowed her pace, studying each portrait. Women with solemn eyes, men with weary expressions, children standing stiffly beside towering elders. All of them carried the same expression, an almost gentle sadness, as if they had once known her and were relieved she had finally come home. At the end of the hallway stood a door, not grinned, not elaborate, simple, wooden, sealed with a lock that matched the shape of her key. Evelyn's breath caught. The house rippled with anticipation. She stepped closer. The wood of the door bore faint carvings, crescents, stars, swirling lines forming a symbol she recognized from the hidden room upstairs. Her fingers trembled as she lifted the key toward the lock. The metal slid in smoothly, almost too easily, as though it had never been meant for any other hand. A soft click followed. The house exhaled. Slowly, Evelyn pushed the door open. Warm, golden light spilled out, as gentle as candle flame, illuminating a small room lined with shelves. Old books. Boxers wrapped in twine. Framed sketches, and in the center a wooden table holding a single object that seemed to glow from within. A locket. Oval. Silver. Etched with the same crescent moon crossed by a line. Evelyn stepped forward, drawn to it like a familiar voice calling from another room. Her fingertips brushed the locket. The room shifted immediately. Not around her but behind her eyes. A memory bloomed. Not from childhood, not from any life she remembered, yet it felt unquestionably hers. A woman standing in a field under a moonless sky, a promise whispered against the wind, a hand reaching for hers, this house waiting, like a guardian of stories too heavy for any one lifetime to carry. Evelyn gasped softly as the vision faded. The locket warmed in her hand. She opened Italiano. Inside was a delicate drawing, faded but unmistakable. A girl with dark hair, soft eyes, a quiet strength in her expression. Beneath the drawing, etched in tiny script, "Return when the moon refuses the street." Evelyn's pulse thudded softly in her ears. She remembered the name of the street she lived on. The street, the townsfolk told her, was always dimmer, always darker, always strangely untouched by moonlight. She felt the truth pressed gently against her chest, not suffocating, only insistent. This wasn't the first time she had walked here, and the house had been waiting for her to unearth the story she left behind. Thunder rumbled again, softer now. The house hummed gently, a comforting presence. Evelyn closed the locket around the tiny drawing and held it to her heart. "I'm listening," she whispered into the warm quiet. "Show me the rest." And somewhere deep within its wooden bones, the house stood ready to reveal the memory she had once promised never to forget. The locket lay warm against Evelyn's chest as she stepped back from the table, its faint glow pulsing gently through the thin chain, curled around her fingers. The room seemed to breathe with her, every wooden beam exhaling in a long, soft rhythm that matched the slow beating of her heart. The storm outside deepened, rain whispering steadily against the windows, thunder rolling low and distant like a memory stirring beneath layers of time. She felt the weight of the locket, the journal tucked beneath her arm, and the soft vibration of the keys still lingering against her palm. All three objects seemed connected threads of a story woven through her past, or perhaps someone else's past that had become intertwined with her own. The house hummed, a warm and quiet encouragement. Evelyn turned slowly, letting her gaze drift across the shelves lining the secret room. Books rested in uneven stacks, their spines cracked and faded, titles illegible from age. Boxers tied shut with brittle twine leaned gently against one another, as though sharing the burden of decades spent waiting. Everything here felt touched by the same patient, lingering memory, a memory that clung to the walls like dust made of whispers. She stepped toward a shelf near the far corner. The journal hummed soft, but insistent whenever she came close to certain books, guiding her hand as though pointing out pieces that belonged to her. She reached for a thin, leather-bound volume, its surface worn smooth by fingers that could have been her own in another era. When she opened it, the pages fluttered with a soft, papery sigh, revealing sketches of landscapes, forests under moonless skies, a field with a crooked fence, a narrow street illuminated only by lanterns, the moon hanging above but refusing to cast its glow. The same street she lived on now. The same street whispered about by locals who claimed the moon avoided it, as if out of respect or warning. Evelyn traced the lines of the sketch with her eyes. The shadows in the drawing seemed to shift, almost breathing under the dim golden light. For a heartbeat, she glimpsed a figure standing in the middle of that street, a silhouette with familiar posture, a hand lifted as though waiting for someone. She blinked, and the figure was gone. The house's warm breath rustled through the room. She placed the book down and moved to another shelf. A wooden box, small and light, caught her attention. The lid opened easily beneath her touch. Inside lay a stack of letters, their edges yellowed and delicate. The handwriting on the top envelope matched the script inside the journal. She lifted it carefully, unfolding the brittle paper. To the one who will return, whether in this life or the next. Evelyn's pulse fluttered. She read on, her eyes sinking into the looping handwriting. The letter spoke of a promise made beneath a moonless sky, a vow shared between two souls, bound by something stronger than time. It described a separation forced, painful, and a house built as a sanctuary, a refuge where memory could wait without fading. A house that would remember even if she could not. A house that whispered to the moon to keep the street in shadow, signaling the moment her spirit reborn, returned or rediscovered, walked it again. The letter ended with a line that made her breath catch. When you are ready to remember, follow the key to the door that doesn't appear until your heart calls for it. She lowered the letter slowly, her fingers trembling. Every piece fit too well. The key, the journal, the locket, the hidden room, the house that knew her name before she spoke it aloud. Thunder rumbled, soft and distant. Evelyn turned toward the door she had entered through, feeling the house's quiet anticipation gather like warmth. At her back, the truth wasn't meant to frighten her. It was meant to guide her home. She took the locket from her chest again, opening it carefully. The drawing inside seemed to glow under the dim light. The girl's eyes held a softness that tugged, something deep within Evelyn's bones, recognition so old it hurt. And beneath that recognition, a question. Was that girl her in another lifetime? or someone she had once loved beyond the boundary of one life. The house shifted gently, as though reminding her she did not need to answer yet. She closed the locket with a soft click and held it tightly in her palm. The journal vibrated in response, as if urging her forward. She stepped out of the hidden room. The hallway greeted her with a warm, familiar hush. The portraits on the walls seemed to watch her with quiet approval, their blurred expressions softening under the lantern glow. The storm outside softened into a steady rain, steady enough to lull the house into a gentle sway. Evelyn paused at the foot of the stairs. She sensed something waiting above something woven into the final pages of the journal, something connected to the key that still tingled faintly in her hand. She took a deep, steadying breath. "I'm ready," she whispered into the warm darkness. The house answered with a tender creak, inviting her upward, and with the key, the locket, and the journal held close, Evelyn began to climb toward the truth she had carried across lifetimes. The silence in the house settled again, as though it had been waiting for me to stop moving, waiting for my breathing to slow, waiting for the last tremor of fear to leave my hands. Yet even when I stood still, the air around me did not. It felt as if something unseen moved in soft, deliberate currents, like the faint sweep of a long-forgotten memory brushing past my shoulder. I kept my footsteps gentle as I walked down the narrow hallway, the old wallpaper fading into soft blue shadows. Every door I passed seemed to hold a quiet story behind it, some deeper echo of the house's life before I arrived. And though none of them opened, I felt watched not with menace, but with a patient curiosity, as if the house itself was trying to decide whether I was ready to understand what it had been trying to show me. When I reached the end of the corridor, the same gentle tapping returned, not sharp this time, but rhythmic, like fingertips softly drumming on wood from the inside of a dream. It didn't scare me the way it had earlier. Instead, it felt like a reminder, an invitation to keep going. The door in front of me, the one slightly warped at the edges, the one I had been unconsciously avoiding since arriving here, trembled once and then became still again. As if taking a breath, I pressed my palm against it. The wood was warm. It opened without a sound. Inside, dust floated like slow-motion snowfall, catching the dull moonlight leaking through the small square window. The room was empty except for an old dresser pushed to one side and a simple wooden chair in the corner. Nothing remarkable, nothing strange, and yet I knew this was where the house had been leading me. There was a heaviness on the floorboards, an imprint of presence, something that had once been here for a very long time, something that had left but not fully gone. I stepped in, and the air shifted again, carrying that familiar scent. I couldn't name old paper, maybe, or linen stored too long, or nights that belonged to someone else. My eyes drifted toward the dresser. One drawer was slightly open, as though someone had searched through it recently, though no one else had been in the house. I pulled it out. Inside was only a single folded sheet of paper, yellowed at the corners but untouched by dust. My heartbeat slowed as I opened it. The handwriting was delicate, looping, patient. It didn't address anyone by name. It didn't begin with a greeting. It simply said, "If you found this, then you already know I could not stay. The house will keep the rest." A soft chill traveled down my spine, not from fear but from understanding something I hadn't yet put words to. The house wasn't haunted by something dangerous. It was holding on to someone who had once needed it, someone who had disappeared into its silence, someone who had trusted its walls to remember what they could not. As I folded the note, the tapping sound returned this time behind me, slow, gentle, almost approving. When primera tunit, the room was unchanged, yet I felt a quiet warmth, like a presence exhaling in relief. The house had shown me what it wanted me to see. It wasn't asking for answers. It wasn't expecting me to solve anything. It only needed someone to acknowledge its memory, to know that the past it carried had weight, shape, and truth. And somehow, standing there in that dim, dust-soft space, I felt a calm settle through me, the kind that sinks deep, like warm water or a long exhale after holding breath for too long. I whispered, barely audible, "I understand," and the room, in its stillness, whispered back in the only way it could, by letting the air grow lighter, letting the dust drift gently upward as though rising from sleep. When I stepped out and closed the door behind me, something subtle shifted in the hallway. The shadows seemed softer, the silence less dense. I realized then that the house hadn't been trying to frighten me. It had been trying to trust me. As I walked back toward the living room, the last of the tapping faded away, leaving only a deep, settling quiet, the kind that comes after a truth is finally spoken, even if only in the language of old doors and moonlit dust. And that was how Chapter 2 ended. Not with fear, but with understanding, with the calm weight of a secret shared, and with the sense that somewhere deep within its bones, the house finally felt a little less alone.